Story 1. A year after I moved to London, I found myself on a mission at a bank in Paris. Since it was my birthday, I organized an evening at a restaurant with some friends I hadn't seen in a while. Unfortunately, a few of my colleagues overheard my plans and decided to invite themselves along. One of my guests, a childhood friend, is a surgeon specializing in facial reconstruction. He works for Doctors Without Borders, and he's 5 years older than me. I used to date his sister for a while before she sadly passed away from an overdose. I was good to her, always trying to help her quit, and because of that, he's always had a soft spot for me. During dinner, the traders I work with started bragging about how much money they were making. Then they asked my friend how much he earned, and when he told them which wasn't much, they laughed at him. When it was time to pay, they tried to stick me with their share of the bill, which was way beyond my budget. Thankfully, Guillaume stepped in and discreetly paid before things got ugly. The next day at work, the arrogant guys asked me if I felt bad for letting poor Guillaume pay. I told them no because, in reality, Guillaume is quite wealthy. His family is actually one of the top 5 richest families in France, but he simply doesn't care about money. He lives alone in a 200 square meter townhouse on one of the biggest avenues in Paris and doesn't even need the paycheck from Doctors Without Borders. In fact, he donates it back to the organization. Suddenly, these guys were all eager to know when our great pal Guillaume would be visiting again because they had some great investment opportunities for him and his family. Later that day, Guillaume came to pick me up for lunch, just the two of us. Since I didn't have a French phone number and phones aren't allowed on the trading floor, the receptionist used the intercom to announce Mr. Guillaume for me at reception. His family name is very distinct and easily recognizable. The boss of those arrogant traders overheard it and immediately recognized who Guillaume was. He rushed over to introduce himself. But Guillaume, without missing a beat, mentioned that after 2 of the boss's employees tried to stick one of his best friends with the restaurant bill, there was no way he'd be trusting them with his family's money. In fact, he said, he would recommend that his father look for a more ethical bank. As we left, we could hear the boss tearing into those 2 guys. Story 2. I'm currently 29 years old. In 2020, my wife, then girlfriend, and I were moving from a house that was in my name to a new place that we got in her name. My mom and brother were going to move into that house under the agreement that they would pay the mortgage and handle any issues or repairs that came up. I wouldn't be responsible for any expenses related to the house. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of not getting that agreement in writing. My mom even agreed to pay an extra $100 on the house payment so I could make a small profit. Fast forward to 2022, and the house payment increased beyond what they were paying. But I was kind enough to cover the additional amount. It was about $60 a month. During this time, I was told that my brother would eventually take over the house and the loan in his name when he got his credit cards paid down. Fast forward to the present day, and the house payment has gone up by about $250 more than it originally was. It's now $700 a month due to taxes and escrow. Now, my mom is threatening me, saying she can't afford it anymore, and implying that I'm being unreasonable for making her pay more, even though the increase is due to taxes, which are obviously out of my control. On top of that, I was removed from both the car insurance plan and the cell phone plan that I've been on with my mom since I was a teenager because it's cheaper as a bundle. My mom also claims I should be responsible for any repairs since the house is still in my name, even though that wasn't part of our original agreement. When I brought up the idea of just putting the house in my brother's name, I found out that instead of paying down his credit cards, he had actually run them up to $13,000. He was doing the exact opposite of what he had promised me. I feel completely disrespected because I know if I wasn't related to them, they wouldn't be treating me this way. My mom hasn't spoken to me in over a week, all because the house payment went up to $700, and now I'm worried she might just stop paying me altogether. On top of that, I'm dealing with getting my wife's car insurance sorted out and getting my own cell phone plan. This situation has also led to disagreements between my wife and me. I know my wife comes first, even before my mom and brother, so I just want to get the house out of my name and be done with it. At this point, I'm realizing the only solution is to sell the house. I'm hoping for some alternative advice or just confirmation that I'm doing the right thing for my wife and myself. Some extra details. I didn't make them pay a security deposit because of our agreement that it was essentially their house. I didn't ask for a pet deposit either. Since then, they've gotten another dog, and it has been peeing on the carpet. The central air conditioning also broke, and they haven't gotten it fixed. If there are any other questions, I'd be glad to provide more details. Story 3. So, I'm back with one more, final post about my entitled parents. This happened last January, and the reason it will probably be my final post is that I've decided to cut contact with them. Here's why. In January, I decided to visit my hometown to show my wife, where I grew up, the local food, the family besides my parents, and the scenery. Primarily, I wanted to visit my grandmother on my mother's side, bless her soul. I also wanted to give my parents a chance to redeem themselves. I called my parents a month in advance to let them know that we'd be visiting in a week. Instead of being happy and making plans to see me, they came up with countless excuses, mostly citing religious reasons, saying they had too many responsibilities to just drop everything and be with us. I was disappointed and expressed that to them. I said, "I'm coming to visit you with my wife for just 1 week. You haven't seen me in almost 2 years, and you can't make time because of your religious commitments?" Reluctantly, they agreed to meet up. We ended up eating at a restaurant and then going to my old home. There are a few things from that visit I'll never forget. First, they made so many excuses not to see me or even meet my wife. When we got to their house, my dog, Sweet Melody, was in awful condition. She had knots in her fur everywhere, and she was clearly malnourished. She was old, but still so excited to see me. She was crying and whimpering, and it broke my heart. I wanted to take her with me, but my parents wouldn't allow it, and I didn't want to start a fight in front of my wife. Unfortunately, in that country, reporting animal abuse doesn't accomplish anything. When we sat down to talk and catch up, my parents started judging and dictating my life choices again. They said, "You're in a new stage of life now that you're married. You should think about having children." I immediately responded, "My lineage ends with me. I've had a vasectomy." They replied, "Well, I guess you've skipped that stage. You'll never grow up." I was at my limit, especially since most of the conversation was in Spanish, and my wife doesn't speak Spanish. My wife noticed my tension and comforted me, calming me down before I could lash out. My parents didn't stop, though. They continued criticizing my hobbies, like gaming and building with Lego, repeating that I'd never grow up. The next day, I went to visit my uncles, aunts, and grandparents on my mother's side. It was during that visit that I learned something terrible, which opened my eyes to my parents' entitlement and abusive behavior more than I'd already realized. I've always loved my family members from my mother's side. They are loving and caring people. During a casual conversation, I mentioned, "I wish I could have seen you more often when I was younger." They frowned and said, "We wish that too, but we couldn't." I asked why. That's when they told me the truth. My extended family had always gifted me things and celebrated my successes with love. But my parents were jealous because they didn't have the time or money to treat me like that. So, they threatened my extended family, telling them they would cut me out of their lives if they showed me too much affection. My extended family, out of fear of losing me, kept their distance and only maintained the bare minimum of contact. My parents would lie, saying things like, "They're busy," or "We don't have time," when in reality, my family was always willing to visit. My parents even threatened my grandfather, telling him never to talk to me about potential opportunities for my future. They explained that, to my parents, I was not wanted and was considered a burden. But they wouldn't let anyone else help me because that would expose their inability or unwillingness to love me. To keep me from bothering them, they just distracted me with video games while they focused on their business or religious activities, paying little attention to me. After hearing all of this, I broke down in tears with the rest of my family, and we hugged each other. When my visit was over, I kept both my parents and extended family updated on where I was boarding the plane, taking off, landing, and arriving home via text. My extended family responded every time, thanking me for letting them know, wishing me a safe flight, and telling me how much they enjoyed seeing me. But my parents never responded to any of my messages, not once. That was the final straw. I've decided to completely cut contact with my parents. I tried, but they've shown their true colors, and I don't have to tolerate that anymore. Thank you to everyone who has read this far and shown me love and support. It's been therapeutic for me to share this, and I'm going to keep my head up and enjoy a happy life. The same goes for all of you. Don't tolerate nonsense from entitled people, no matter who they are. You matter. Seek help, or keep your head up. Life will get better. Story 4. I was manning the counter when this lady walked in. She had that look, the kind that screams, "I'm always right," before even opening her mouth. She marched up to me and placed her order. I greeted her and asked for her order. She demanded a venti caramel macchiato, extra hot, with soy milk and extra caramel drizzle. When I asked for a name for the order, she told me it was Karen, emphasizing that it was spelled with a K. I wrote down her name and started preparing her drink. When it was ready, I called out her name. She came to pick up her drink, but as soon as she saw the cup, her face twisted into a scowl. She angrily pointed out that I had spelled her name wrong. I looked at the cup and realized I had written Karen instead of Karen. It was an honest mistake, but I was ready to fix it. I apologized and offered to get her a new cup with the correct spelling. But Karen refused, insisting that changing the cup would make the coffee taste bad. I tried to assure her that changing the cup wouldn't affect the taste at all. Karen accused me of calling her stupid and claimed she knew how coffee worked. Her voice was getting louder, and other customers were starting to stare. I tried to keep my cool and reason with her. I attempted to clarify that I wasn't implying anything and just wanted to correct the mistake on her cup. But Karen wouldn't hear it. She yelled that I had ruined her entire day and demanded that I fix it immediately. Before I could even respond, she grabbed the cup and threw the hot coffee right at me. The scalding liquid splashed across my chest and arms. I yelped in pain and shock. Karen then demanded that I make her a new coffee and get it right this time. I was stunned. The pain from the hot coffee was setting in, and I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. Just then, my manager came rushing out from the back, having heard the commotion. My manager asked what was going on. Karen immediately started accusing me of incompetence and refusing to make her a new coffee. My manager looked at me, covered in coffee, then back at the woman who was red-faced and yelling. He told Karen to leave the premises immediately. She refused, insisting she wouldn't go anywhere until she got her coffee. My manager informed her that she had just assaulted an employee and that he was calling the police. Karen protested, invoking the "customer is always right" motto. My manager pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Karen started screaming even louder, demanding to speak to the owner of Starbucks and threatening to sue us all. Other customers were recording the whole thing on their phones. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. They listened to my manager's explanation and took statements from me and some of the other customers who had witnessed the incident. The officers told Karen she needed to come with them. She protested, claiming she hadn't done anything wrong and that we were the ones who couldn't spell a simple name. The officers weren't having any of it. They calmly but firmly escorted Karen out of the store, reading her rights as they went. As they were leaving, Karen was still yelling, threatening that we hadn't heard the last of her and that she'd have all our jobs. After they left, my manager sent me to the back to clean up and change into a spare uniform. He assured me that the company would press charges and that I could take the rest of the day off if I needed to. The whole incident left me shaken. I couldn't believe someone would get so worked up over a misspelled name, let alone assault a person over it. As I sat in the back room, icing my burns, I thought about how quickly things had escalated, all over a cup of coffee and a simple mistake. The rest of the day was a blur of filling out incident reports and talking to the district manager. My coworkers were supportive, bringing me ice packs and offering words of encouragement. Even some of the regular customers who had witnessed the event came back later to check on me. As I left work that evening, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would Karen face consequences for her actions? Would she learn anything from this experience? Somehow, I doubted it. But I knew one thing for sure: I'd be double-checking the spelling on every cup from now on, just in case. Story 5. So I, 27 male, have a sister who's a few years older than I am. I'm not sure how old she is now, as we have as little contact as possible. For as long as I have been alive, I can say that she is responsible for 99% of the problems my family and I have had. I have 2 brothers and a mother. My father was an alcoholic who drank us out of our first home. Story for another day, I guess. But due to that, we moved in with my grandparents. Well, that is except for my sister, who moved in with her godmother for reasons at the time I was completely unaware of. It turns out my nan had already figured out what she was like and didn't want her in her home. I am the youngest of my siblings. My brother, 28 male now, is so heavily disabled mentally that he was the constant target of abuse from every kid he came into contact with. My eldest brother and I were always being attacked because we were simply related to him. But he can't be blamed, as apart from school and the odd trip down to the local warren with my other brother and myself, never left the confines of our grandparents' garden. I was talking to my sister about it one day. I was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. I mentioned how the only good thing was that they simply didn't know where we lived. Little did I know that was a mistake. The next day she showed up with over 20 of the worst kids and led them into the front garden, which was surrounded by trees and an 8-foot-tall hedge, and loudly called my brothers and me out. We very rarely saw my mother, as she slept in a tent in the front garden and was out all day every day working to get us our own home again. As such, my 80-year-old grandfather went out to see what was going on. When he saw that they not only began tearing up plants and breaking garden furniture, my nan and I used to spend my days off of school planting flowers and looking after the garden. So this pissed him off. They also took everything they could out of the tent my mother lived in. They then began squaring up to my grandfather, and one even pushed him. It was at this time my older brother, now 31, appeared, as if from thin air. He's always been on the heavy side, but he sent these kids scattering with ease. Don't think they even hurt him. Then began a standoff between them at the garden gate as they threw stuff at us while we waited for the police. The entire time my sister, who couldn't have been more than 13 at this time, was leaning on the wall across the road smoking, laughing, and shouting for them to just jump the gate and get in the garden again. This ultimately ended up with kids coming to our home daily, running in the garden, stealing things. Quite a few times I'd be sitting there with my disabled brother chatting, and kids would just run into the garden and start beating us black and blue. My sister's laugh was always close by. If we were lucky, my eldest brother would respond, but if he wasn't there, we would just have to sit there and take it until my gamps would shout at them. He even started keeping walking sticks he didn't need by the front door, just in case he needed a weapon. She would also regularly call my mother and tell her that my brothers and I were out breaking windows and stealing from shops. As I mentioned earlier, there was a good few years where we saw her maybe a handful of times a month. And due to us being poor and my sister stealing from her godmother, even after she passed away, was the only one with a phone. I can't say about my brothers, but due to her influence I had no friends in school, and my older brother having severe anger issues meant that apart from my cat and my grandparents, I was completely isolated. So when my mother would appear and begin to scold me for things that hadn't happened, only made things worse for me. It took me years to get over the thought that I wasn't good enough for anyone and just caused problems wherever I went. She also began lying about being attacked and bullied in school, leading my mother to stop working and run to her side in school. This would not be the last time she lied about things of this nature. My grandfather passed away in 2014, so I moved in with my nan to look after her. After a year, my sister offered to move in with the kid and her boyfriend if they could stay in the house after she passed. My nan? I agree. As stated before, my nan and sister hated each other. It was only a matter of time before she split with her baby daddy. She came to live with my mother and I, and this began the worst year of my life. We eventually got a new home, and my sister refused to move in with us, staying instead with a family friend, which I don't remember having an opinion on at the time. I simply didn't want anyone to notice I was alive, let alone put forward an opinion. And my mother came home one night over the moon that she had made pound 100. I don't remember how, but she said we would go out the next day as a family and have fun. My mother woke us the next day and couldn't find her purse that she always kept by the front door. We spent the next 5 hours tearing the house apart looking for her purse. Then my sister walked in and asked why the house was turned upside down. When my mother told her, she began to help look for the purse. For about 30 seconds before finding it, she claimed it was on the table by the front door. The table at this point was in the living room and in many pieces, as I had taken it apart to see if it had fallen down the back of the drawers. My mother took the purse off of her to find no money in it. When she asked where the money had gone, my sister replied, "OP probably took it. He's always been a little thief," and walked out the front door. My mother, for many years before and after this, believed everything my sister said as gospel. So while my brother stood up for me, it was no use and I was punished. A few weeks later, I was painting some Warhammer at home when the house phone rang. It was my mother. She claimed my sister was a few minutes down the road and had just been attacked. My mother asked that I run down and take care of her and bring her home. So I did. I took off sprinting as any good brother would do. I was an Army cadet at this point, so made it there in maybe 3 minutes. She was leaning on a garden wall smoking and began shouting abuse at me for not being our mother. She then punched me in the stomach and began walking towards my home. After getting my breath back, I followed. She hid herself in the kitchen, and I sat down at the folding table I had set up by the front door to paint some more Warhammer. I don't know why, but she pulled me out of the chair I was sitting in, kicked the table over, and pinned me to the wall by my throat and began screaming at me. I can't remember what she said, only that I was terrified. Being 11 or 12 years of age, I didn't know how to react, and her arms being longer than mine, I couldn't reach her to help myself. My mother walked in through the front door, and she dropped me, claiming I was trying to attack her. My mother believed her tears, and I was sent to my room. None of my Warhammer models survived. Looked like she stamped on them afterward. My eldest brother Steve was also an Army cadet, and was perhaps the happiest he would be till he met his now life partner. He had a group of friends, and my sister failed multiple times to turn them against him, going even so far as to join the cadets herself to try and turn them against him. When all else failed, she claimed that one of the group had raped her. Nothing came of it, as he was halfway across the country with my brother at the time it was supposed to have happened. Either way, my brother, being a good brother, decided to believe his sister, and many of his friends went their separate ways. This is not the last time she would claim someone raped her. My mother has several debilitating disabilities, and thus had a drawer in her room filled with prescription painkillers. My eldest brother had moved out a few months prior, and I began getting flash headaches. A blinding light for a second, and then hours of throbbing pain. Thought I had a brain tumor. Turns out it was a trapped nerve, and I'm fine. But after a few weeks of pain, I finally asked my mother if I could have some painkillers to help me sleep. She, of course, let me. The next 7 years, I would be routinely asked why I was taking so many pain meds. I always told her I wasn't. After the headaches were fixed, I did not need them. But they kept going missing. Pots full of them at a time in some cases, and being as only my disabled brother, and I lived at home, it was easy to blame me. Eventually, my brother got moved to his own flat on disability, and it was just my mother and I at home. And for a while things were good. I'd cuddle my now old black cat named Baggers and watch TV with my mother. My sister got with an amazing man who I love very much and moved in with him. This wasn't new, as she was moving from one man to the next as soon as the family friend kicked her out at 18. But he stuck around longer than usual. My mother told me one day that she may be splitting up with him, and was quite upset about it as she too really likes him. The next month she got pregnant. When I went out for a drink with her boyfriend, he got really pissed and confided that he didn't understand how it could happen. She was on the pill, and he always wore a condom. She now has 2 kids with him, and they are separated. It was shortly after that she claimed a man she was working for was sexually assaulting and raping her on a daily basis and got the police involved. Of course, they found no evidence but turned my nan's house into a fortress, welding plates over the letter flaps, setting up cameras, and reinforcing all the doors and windows. This drove my nan insane, saying that she'd lived in the house since it was built over 60 years ago and had never felt scared. Probably because my granddad was a beast of man, but you never know. The man she claimed did all of this is her new current boyfriend who looks after her kids. See, told you I'd post TikTok fams. I was working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a warehouse as a janitor. I was a supervisor with one team of 2 doing the work of 10, except my staff didn't do the job and all my complaints fell on deaf ears, meaning I had to come in early and finish late to get all of the work done. Not so bad. I could always come home after 13 hours of work and sleep right. Wrong. My sister moved the kids in with her, and every day would wait for me to get home. Wait for me to settle in bed, then kick my bedroom door open and throw my now awake nephews at me. This went on for 6 months, getting maybe 2 hours of sleep every 2 days. And cycling an hour and a half to and from work didn't help either. About 3 months in, my mother met who I now call my stepdad. I love this man, a mechanic, farmer, carpenter, you name it, he can do it type of guy. Turned our back garden from a patch of mud into a place to sit in the sun. Sheds, decking, ponds, you want it, he made it. And just like my nan, he figured her out immediately and from day one was defending me. I lost my job at the warehouse and was working part-time as a barista and looking for an exit door for my life, when an old friend contacted me from South Ireland. Look, OP, I know you lost your job and you're going through a lot right now. I've got a job and I've got a bed for you. I'll pay for your ticket, just get over here. And with a day, maybe 2 considerations, I took him up on the offer and his brother came over to collect me. I was there maybe a week before my mother phoned me crying her eyes out. Turns out that after I left she lived alone with my stepdad. Her pills kept going missing. So she set up a trap. She bought a safe and put all her remaining pills bar 1 bottle in it. She knew my sister was dropping by. And when she went to use the toilet she took the pot. As my mother went up after she had left and finally knew I was innocent. 7 years of suspicions and arguments, driving a wedge between my mother and me. It opened her eyes, and in turn, I opened up. I bombarded her with every single problem I have ever had. Every time she punished me for her lies or her stealing things. 20 years of hate poured out of me, a bit like here now I think about it. The only thing I never understood was why she always made me her target. I once told someone that I had great instincts and knew if a person was a bad person simply by looking at them. And to this day, I've never been wrong about a person. And when I talk about my sister, people often ask, do you have that ability because of her? Is it that you see aspects of her in people, and that's why you instinctively hate them? And if so, I can thank her for one thing at least. Sorry for the ranting of this. It was only going to be a small rant. But once I started, I couldn't stop. The pain and suffering she has brought to not only me, but my family. Even my saint of a grandfather who loved everyone hated her. And that takes a lot. I thought the man incapable of hate. But as I sat and listened to him in his final months, he proved me wrong. Story 6. I am happy and guilty. Happy because I am leaving my mom's mental space, where I can't be who I truly am. I can't be seen or heard because my mom has never realized that the world around her isn't exactly what she believes it to be. So, when something isn't as she's decided, like me, for example, or some rule, she dismisses it as nonsense me or irrelevant rule. My mom isn't a bad person. She wouldn't steal or hurt anyone. She also has certain internal principles she never betrays. She's tough. But being around her feels like giving up on life. I'm 55 years old, by the way, not exactly young, and I can confirm this issue lasts a lifetime, especially if, like me, you're fortunate enough to have built a successful life. My mom needs me as an audience, so she does what she can to keep me around. Her way of communicating doesn't work for anyone else. She has no friends, no one to check on her. She hasn't done anything bad to others, but she's not enjoyable to be around because she only wants to prove her points and dismantle other people's views and conversations. This is her idea of a stimulating discussion. Naturally, no one likes it. So, there's only me, the special one. I feel guilty. I feel like I'm failing to appreciate my mom in her entirety, to see her sense of entitlement as a small, non-essential part of the bigger picture of motherhood. But I can't. I know what she needs. I know I can make the effort to give it to her in small doses. I do make an effort once a day. I live in a different country from her and call her to provide the audience and listen to her day. I have no issue with that part of the conversation. But then she asks me how my day went. And that's when it gets harder. I have to accept, every time, that she's not truly interested in my day. She's just looking for places in my story where she can disagree. These disagreements are stimulating for her. I'm basically handing her my life to play with, to amuse herself. My life is like a toy in her hands. It's taken me a lifetime to understand this. I still provide her with my life as a toy, so she can feel important. In return, she agrees to certain boundaries I've set. For instance, she can't call me, I'm the one who calls her. But I've trained her to expect that I'll never miss a call. In 25 years, I never have. Sick or busy, I still call. It works. My vacation time is spent visiting her overseas. It's the hardest time for me because I'm deprived of my world, my life, my infrastructure, my mindset. Everything shrinks down to the childhood apartment with its rules, problems, routines, and demands. With those short blankets that never fully cover me. I still don't understand what's up with those blankets. I'm only 5'6". My mom is 5'2". I guess the blankets are for her height. Or maybe they're from a time when people were shorter. Communication is tough. My mom would prefer to communicate through signals. I can see how hard it is for her to truly consider me. But as a fully grown adult who makes the daily call, I'm valued. Well, like an operating system, important, but in the background. Only as I've gotten older have I started to see it all clearly. The broken mechanism of her sense of entitlement. I do feel compassion for it, but I know it's futile. My mom doesn't miss what she doesn't have. It's my job to make the effort to give her an audience. She can't gather or maintain an audience on her own. It would take effort, and she doesn't invest in it. Maybe if she didn't have me, she would have found something else. But I'm here. I do love her. I know I can't make her happy. The only way to make her happy is to sit next to her in case she needs me. Ask for nothing, do nothing, and just give her an audience when she wants it. I have to agree with her all the time, let her take me apart, break me down, and have no mind of my own. Even that wouldn't make her happy, though, because then she wouldn't be able to be proud of me. She needs that, too, because it validates her worth. But being a successful person, both professionally and personally, is incompatible with the mentality she lives in. I think she understands this on some level, and it breeds some resentment in her, as if she's not truly winning. But it doesn't run too deep, and for as long as she feels she has some control over me, the daily 30-minute call is our agreement. She accepts it. Living with her for 2.5 weeks is about self-abandonment, constant headaches, and pushing myself to the brink of my mental capacity. Not much physical effort, but no rest. I'm in far better shape working my busy life overseas. Not sure why exactly I'm posting this, but maybe some of you can relate.